Still ahead, measles outbreaks have been recorded across the globe. UNICEF calls this global surge alarming and says it poses a growing threat to children. We'll discuss the trend and what can be done to combat it, including here in Canada, coming up. Welcome back to CBC News Network Tonight. I'm Carol McNeil. Italy today announced that it will no longer allow unvaccinated children to go to school after an outbreak of the measles. They say parents must present proof that their children have been vaccinated against a range of diseases, including the measles. This was a disease that was once close to being eradicated, only to make a comeback around the globe. More than 82,000 cases in Europe alone. In Canada, the disease was declared officially eliminated in 1998. New infections are now brought back by travelers and lead to sporadic outbreaks like the one Vancouver is currently dealing with. In Canada, 11 new cases of measles were reported last month, with 12 other cases still ongoing. That brings the total number of measles to 19 in the first 3 months of this year alone. Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, says, "I am very concerned to see vaccine-preventable diseases, particularly those as serious and highly contagious as measles, making a comeback in Canada and around the globe. From my perspective, even one child dying of measles is unacceptable. Seeds of doubt are often planted or misleading, or worse, entirely false information being spread in campaigns that target parents on social media and the internet. It is no wonder some parents are confused and concerned." Joining me now to discuss the ongoing outbreaks and why we're seeing this return of measles and the danger of it is Dr. Iris Gorfinkel, a family physician based in Toronto. Dr. Gorfinkel, let's talk about the disease itself first. How dangerous is measles?
Measles is actually an influenza look-alike. So what's interesting about it is that it starts out with a high fever, just like influenza, and it can actually mimic influenza in the fact that it causes a variety of respiratory symptoms, runny nose, sore throat, bit of a cough. But the difference is you have to look at the inside of the cheek where you'll see a white rash. And those spots are what define it to both the doctor and the patient as potential for measles.
Okay, and how dangerous is it?
Well, 1 out of 1,000 will get pneumonia with it, and that can be fatal. So pneumonia, encephalitis, it's known to cause blindness, it's known to cause deafness, and frankly, there's just no excuse for it because the vaccination is pretty much 100% effective.
All right, then what's behind the increase in these measles cases?
The problem is we're just not getting enough kids vaccinated. That's the issue. So in BC, for example, the vaccination rates are about 87%. Ontario can boast about 91%, go Quebec at 92%, but when you get to the northerly communities, vaccination rates are in the 60%, and that's very concerning.
Okay, 91%, is that enough?
No, it's not, because when we're talking about herd immunity, in other words, enough of us are protected to protect our neighbors, we're talking at a minimum of 95%.
Okay, what do you say to parents who say, "I'm afraid that this is going to hurt my child"?
You know, you would have had to ask that question to me at different times in my career. There was a time in my career where I was really hard-lined about it, and I'd say, well, if you couldn't accept vaccinations, well, what can you accept that I offer? Because the evidence base on vaccinations is just so great. At this point in time, though, I'm more of the listening. Like, I try to listen. I try to understand the perspectives. I try to identify what are the fears around vaccination. A lot of the time, it's just the timing isn't right. They're worried about immediate side effects. It's actually very, very few who are concerned in the long run what's the potential for harm from vaccinations.
Okay, so what are their fears in the short term?
If you're talking about the staunch anti-vaxxers, is that your question?
No, I'm talking about just, you say there's some parents who have very short, maybe it's the wrong time, they're not sure about it right now. What are their concerns?
Those are the group of parents that a reassurance goes a long way. So I just explained that vaccinations cause redness and soreness at the injection site, and we know ways to absolutely minimize that reaction. If the mother is nursing when the shot is given, the combination of the breastfeeding, the taste, the smell of the mother, the sound of the mother, all reduce the pain reaction. So the immediate pain reaction, we're not just talking about giving a child Tylenol here. There's a lot we can do to keep the baby very comfortable while the baby is getting its primary series.
What do the so-called anti-vaxxers say to you?
You know, so there's a very small, but unfortunately vocal percentage of parents, and we're talking less than 2%, who are anti-vaccine, and pretty much no matter what I say, it's very difficult to change their minds. And it's this particular group that I basically try to listen and understand their concerns and address the concerns in a scientific manner. It's very hard to argue with the fact that the measles vaccination alone saves over 1 million lives every year. The vaccination is one of the best buys in public health that we have for a disease which is highly, highly contagious.
And so what did they say in return to that, in response to that?
You know, it's difficult because truly, you're talking about the true hardcore anti-vaxxer, it's difficult. A lot of them will have come in and made up their minds. But I try to listen and I try to come back to science. I try to address their exact concerns. Many of them will cite the Andrew Wakefield's study, if you can call it that, because that was debunked. It was published in The Lancet, and in The Lancet's history, it was the only article which was totally retracted. And Andrew Wakefield, the scientist who made these claims, actually lost his license as a result of it.
Yeah, he claimed that there was a link between these vaccinations and autism in children.
And that has so long been debunked, and it was debunked not by one study, but by multiple studies. And the sad thing about it is, a lot of those studies just redid what we already knew. So it was a waste of scientific effort, in my view. But nevertheless, there's still a small group of anti-vaxxers that remain steadfastly so.
Okay, doctor, let me ask you this. What do you think of Italy's announcement today that no vaccine, no school?
Well, that's what Ontario's doing, and I'm for it. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that for parents who choose to vaccinate their children, who provide the vaccinations which give their children undeniable protection from preventable diseases, I think for that group, it's only fair. It's not fair if a child comes in and actually carries a disease, you know, and puts other children at risk.
If the other children are vaccinated, how are they put at risk?
When it comes to measles, they're not put at risk because the measles vaccination is close to 100% efficacy. But that's not necessarily true for all vaccinations. Most of them are highly, highly efficacious, but that said, nothing is 100%. So we need at least 95% to achieve what's called herd immunity. I have it, you have it, 95% of us have it, therefore we're protected. But that's not the case in all of Canada. The best province, as I said, was only 92%. So that 2% of a difference, those anti-vaxxers, if we could convince them and get them on board, well, that might push us better toward that goal of herd immunity.
And very quickly, the northern communities, why 60%?
Oh my gosh, you know, because the family practice, the primary care, it's spotty in Canada, right? So if you live in a big city, like I'm fortunate to live in, we have enough family doctors. We have enough care to go around. But in these outlying communities, a lot of them don't have access to family practice. A lot of them don't have access to nurse practitioners. And it's something that remains a big problem.
All right. Dr. Iris Gorfinkel, family physician based here in Toronto, thank you for coming in tonight.
Thank you.